Thank you for joining us, Summer. We're super excited to get some insights from you today. We've got a couple of kind of short, quick hitter questions for you. So, the first one is you are in a very competitive state, both where you live and where your company operates. How does your team go about gaining new clients, especially new patients for your practice?
Yeah, so we're fortunate right now to be the largest provider in our state. Our most populous state right now is Nebraska. So I think that in general, our reputation in that area speaks for itself. However, when going into a competitive state, one of the things that you really want to focus on are those community partnerships, and those are going to be absolutely critical. When you're meeting families, they're already part of a micro environment somewhere. And so we want to get into those environments. We want to get into those communities and show that we care not only about what may happen within our center doors, but also what's happening in their community and what's important for that community.
That makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. So, what have you found is one of the hardest parts of growing in new locations, entering new markets? Is it gaining staff, gaining clients? Tell me about it.
I don't think this will be anything that's a blockbuster, but naturally staffing. Not so much with BCBAs, although sometimes we do need to relocate BCBAs to areas in Nebraska. But really keeping up with the need requires a lot of training for our direct staff, our RBTs. And we are very committed to making sure that the staff that are with the children, with our clients, are highly trained. So keeping up with the training, the staff development prior to them going, what I would say, face to face with our clients is likely the biggest challenge. So again, not unlike other organizations, but staffing for sure. The need is there. And so it's keeping up with the need with qualified individuals.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I find that ABA groups, or even just autism services as a whole, it only ever has two settings. It's we desperately need people, or we desperately need clients because we hired too many people. Right, those are the only two. Those are the only two settings, right, of that switch. Um,
Right.
See, you've emphasized and talked a lot about outcomes driven care and like actual measurable progress in ABA.
Yeah.
How do you balance that kind of need for rigorous data with just the reality of every individual is different and humans are humans?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. When I think about this question, I would kind of think about it in terms of I don't actually know how to divorce the two. I worked with many organizations, and some organizations that have a more standardized, if you will, approach, and some that have highly individualized programs. And either way, it's a lot of work. And so I don't know why you wouldn't make sure the personalization isn't there to start with, and that making sure that we're collecting data that are going to actually reflect what the needs are of your client. Just really quickly, I always love to tell little stories, but I can remember sitting, this was early in my career, right? I'm looking at my graphs. They're going to be beautiful. I want them to be up and to the right for most things, or down and to the right if it's behavior reduction. And I remember looking at this graph and I was so proud of it. My insurance company, they were very proud of it. Look at all this progress this kid was making. And I remember a mom coming in and we were going to discuss the graphs and they were having a moment. And she comes in and she's like, I don't know that we're doing anything. Are we accomplishing anything? And it really was professionally for me. It was like, whoa, this is, of course we are. Look at my beautiful graphs, right? But for this particular client, it was sitting back and saying, wow, we're meeting these goals that maybe we identified earlier on, but how many checks and balances have we done along the way to make sure that it is still personalized and not that we're just beating a drum to make sure that things look good from a paper's perspective. So, from that end, I would say that selecting outcomes for our families, it's a hand-in-hand process with the families that we're working with. And so to go back to your question, I actually don't know how to separate the two. I think that it has to be individualized care. I think that you can't actually promote standardization, if you will, from a curriculum standpoint. And I think that it's highly important to focus on that data collection that's occurring within those natural interactions to make sure that what you're seeing as a clinician is the same thing that the family is feeling as a family.
Absolutely, absolutely. Making sure that your experience in the clinic also translates to real
Yeah.
life, right? Because if it
Yeah.
doesn't, then what are we all
What's
doing
the
here,
point?
right?
Right.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. That makes complete sense. And I especially love that point you just now said about actual therapy needs to be personalized, but outcomes and goals also need to be personalized. I think that's something that a
Right.
lot of people miss. I think they think the goals are always these five things. We always want to reduce these behaviors and increase these, and that's just always what it is.
Right. Right.
but
And I like to ask a
it's just
family,
not,
what,
right?
yeah, yeah. What do you want your kid to do? And I remember with the family, I want them to just go to a birthday party. And that doesn't feel like your traditional outcomes goal, but if you're like, all right, well, what steps does that take? That's going to help you
Hmm.
along the way. What's the barrier there? Is it communication? Is it the environment? Is it a new environment? Is it fixed and, rigid responses? How do you get to we're going to go to the birthday party, the neighborhood, birthday
Yeah.
party here? So it's really thinking about what's going to be meaningful for that family, whether it's a religious event, whether it's a birthday party, whether it's participating in school or making new friends. How do you align your goals to get to that birthday party outcome?
I love that. I love that. That's a fantastic example. Perfect. So, next question. Well, we're kind of switching gears here. As someone who's worked as an internal kind of quality assurance and outcome focused director for quite a while, as well as someone who stepped into some state roles, right, and worked in some more external policymaking roles. How has that impacted how you manage and how you focus on quality internally?
Oh, I really love this question. I have recently been appointed by the governor of Texas to serve as an autism advocate for one of his committees. And what's really nice about this is it has allowed me the opportunity to kind of get away from people who speak my language day to day and realize that the people that are in the seats to make policy changes, to make funding available for different things, this is an opportunity in these advisory roles to provide more context around what is actually needed, but also it gives you a little bit of a peek under the covers, if you will, to what the budget is going to look like and what monies have been allocated and how are you using those to the best of the state's outcomes that they have selected for their budget in general. But from an advisory standpoint, from an advocacy standpoint, it also helps with our internal systems because I can see what's coming on the horizon that the state might be concerned about, that funders are going to be concerned about. And I can tell you with the implementation for artificial intelligence, for example, I know that that's a hot topic right now, but I can also tell you that internally, I have an opportunity to say, hey, I know that this is coming down the pike for what's going to be regulatory in 6 months, 8 months time, or this is at least going to come up on the ledger. And so we can start to prepare for those types of things. And so I think it's a meaningful contribution to our field's evolution to be advising and to also be providing that color for individuals that it's still not as common for them to talk about autism, where it's all I've done since 1998. That's it. My whole everything about my career has been centered around autism. But I forget that our policymakers, they're not going to be as fluent in these issues, and so it's been a really really great process, and I hope to continue doing that.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Well, then on the opposite side, right, now that you are more in kind of a clinical operations management advocacy role, how do you go about kind of staying regularly connected to the families that you're advocating for and the individuals that you're advocating for?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. Like what I was saying earlier is getting involved in the community. I mean that. My kids are peer buddies at their schools where they attend. I have really, really close friendships with families that I have been their clinician in the past. Obviously not now because that would be a problem, but I've maintained those friendships. Many of the kids that reach out to me now, they have my phone number. They can text me. They can ask me questions. I'm part of larger groups and some social media platforms to just always be a sounding board. I have so many families that reach out and say, "What are some good questions whenever I'm interviewing ABA companies? What are good questions to be asking?" So I live the role. I don't know again, and maybe that sounds sanctimonious, but I also don't necessarily know how to separate the two. I'll just really briefly, I came into this field because I had a niece born with severe disabilities. And she had not autism, other disabilities, and she only lived for 3 years. However, that time period, you could see how impactful that integration with therapist and family, they really do overlap each other, and you become, truly parts of families. And so I have good friends that have children with autism, and that has been because that's all I do. Again, if there was the epitome of perseveration, it's me with autism for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, it's already part of your daily life, whether it's actually part of your work or not.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that makes complete
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah,
that
yeah.
makes complete sense. And I think that's so that's so common in the space. I think especially in the autism service space, that almost everyone that I've ever talked to in the space has a personal family, if not a
Yeah.
family, then like an adopted family member that has autism or that at least is on the spectrum and has a personal connection, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I mean, my kids have been raised in centers. I was a business owner for a while, and so, for it's just I think when you just really integrate your family into other families that are in the community, then it's not hard to do.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Makes complete sense. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Those were our questions. I hope it wasn't too painful, and I'm really glad we got to pick your brain a little bit.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.